Hey, what's up guys? This is Nishi from MST.TV here. In today's episode, we are going to be taking a little bit more of an in-depth look at the 2020 Megatons. So every year, the Megatons are among the most hyped up products that we get because of all the crazy reprints that they bring to the player base. However, even though prices may come out a certain way on set release, they rarely ever stay that way for long. Sometimes we see prices tank really quickly, and other times we see cards appreciate in value over time. It can be difficult to identify then whether a card is over or underpriced, because initially, most cards will seem cheap relative to their original prices before the reprint. So what we're going to do today is break this video down into two halves. In the first half, we're going to go over 5 cards that I think are overpriced, cards that will decrease in price over time, and cards that should be sold close to the release of the Megatons in order to maximize your value. And then in the second half, we'll take a look at 5 cards that I think you should all be looking at picking up because of their potential to go up in price as time moves on. Let's get started. Alright, so first up, we're going to go over the cards I think you guys should be selling, and the first one is Appaloosa, Bow of the Goddess. Now, this is going to seem like a weird pick at first. Appaloosa is one of the cards that I think absolutely everyone was hoping we would see in the Megatons because it has widely been regarded as one of the best Link 4 monsters available in the game, on par with cards like Boros or Dragon and Access Code Talker, with its ability to provide multiple monster effect negations in the same turn. Appaloosa was easily over $100 for quite a while, so being able to pick up a reprinted copy at the very reasonable price of $23 is definitely going to seem like a steal. However, the big thing that's making me think that Appaloosa should be sold early on is the fact that we have a confirmed alternate art reprint coming in Maximum Gold in October later this year, and that reprint is very likely to tear down the price of the card even further. As much as the Ultra does look pretty nice, it's still the lowest rarity version of the card, so another easily accessible reprint is naturally going to bring the price down even further. If anything, I do think that picking up the secret rares after they've dipped down to around the $40 to $50 mark is a better call overall, just because they're more likely to retain their value over time. If you buy an Ultra Appaloosa at $20 and the gold reprint tanks that Ultra Rare's price down to $10, you've lost $10 on your investment. But if you buy a secret rare copy at $40 and it maintains that $40 price tag, you're better able to retain your value, and hopefully you can sell it back for something much closer to that price, which is going to be easier to do when you have an original print high rarity version of the card. But yeah, I would definitely look into moving any extra copies of Appaloosa that you happen to pull from the tins that you won't need. Holding on to them is definitely a bad idea when we have a confirmed reprint right around the corner. Next up, Starlight Seyfert is a card that will definitely tank in price over the next month or so. When we first saw early pre-orders of the Megaton singles, we saw Seyfert up at $18 to $20 each, and the Megatons are just coming out this weekend, and we're already seeing the price fall down to $9 a piece. The reasoning here is pretty simple. Starlight Seyfert, while it is a really good card, it has very limited applications within the meta. While the card is absolutely amazing in Dragon Link, the card is only really useful in the one deck, and that kind of puts a ceiling as to how high the card's price can go. On top of that, I think that there's a decent chance that we do see Dragon Link hit in some way within the next couple of ban lists. We've already seen the development of the Dragon Link FTK with Earthbound Immortal Aslapiscu and Exploder Rocket Dragon, and even before that, people were calling for Guard Dragon LP to be banned, so it might actually be about time for something within the Dragon Link deck to get hit. Personally, I don't see it as too much of a problem deck, but Konami could definitely want to make room for some newer strategies like the Dogmatica and the Infernoble Knights, so they may want to force out some of the older strategies, and Dragon Link getting hit in any way would definitely tank the price of Seyfert. I think that with the Megatons, we are better off looking at more generic cards to invest in and hold on to, so with its limited applications, Seyfert is definitely a sell for me early on in its release, and I'm expecting them to quickly drop to around $5 each. Alright, so I think that Mystic Mine just might be one of the most infuriating cards to play against in the entire history of Yu-Gi-Oh!, and I'm definitely expecting it to get hit on an upcoming ban list in some way. I know that there are some people who actually like this card. I'm pretty sure those people also enjoy stepping on Lego and dropping their ice cream, so don't take what they say too seriously. I think that the vast majority of the community will agree about how degenerate of a card Mystic Mine really is because of how it oversimplifies the game state and makes it difficult to interact with your opponent in any way. I personally think that Mystic Mine should have never been printed in the first place, but I digress. So because of my expectation of this card getting either banned or limited, I have to put this card in my list of cards to sell, especially since it's on the slightly higher end at $6 to $7 a piece. Admittedly, the card does look beautiful as a secret rare, so once it gets hit, I'll pick up a few copies for my box of banned cards, but until then, I will be dreaming of a day where Yu-Gi-Oh players don't have to play at events where they can get cheesed out by Mystic Mine. So one of the odd things about the 2020 Megatons is that they actually included and reprinted basically every single relevant card from the 4 sets that were included, even those that had already been reprinted. Last year, for instance, we didn't see a reprint of Infinite Impermanence after it was reprinted in Dual Power. This year, however, we are getting reprints of Phantasme, Signet Mining, and Pot of Extravagance, all bigger name cards that have already received reprints, which is a little bit out of the ordinary. Now with this reprint, Phantasme is going to be extremely affordable, especially when you consider that it was a $100 plus card before. Now, however, with this reprint, I think that Phantasme has become a little bit too accessible, and I don't think that we're going to see its price bounce back. As a super rare, it still commands a $5 to $6 price tag, but I think that once we see the tins torn open and the quantities flood the market, it'll actually fall to around the $2 to $3 mark. Now, at the $2 mark, I would definitely invest in a few copies myself, but at anything $5 or higher, it's a definite sell for me. A really notable problem for this card is that if it's on the field, you can't play Infinite Impermanence or Psy-Frame Gear Gamma, 2 really popular cards in the format right now, which isn't great. That limits the demand for this card at this point in time, which is gonna drive the price down even further. If this card wasn't reprinted in Dual Overload, or it wasn't reprinted in the Megatons, if it only had one of those printings, then yeah, it's probably going to look a lot more appealing as an investment option, but the multiple reprints combined with how it can't be used in conjunction with other key cards in the format, unfortunately mean that this card is being marked as a sell for me. And finally, this isn't really a specific card, but rather an entire archetype, and it is the Witchcrafters. I am so sorry, Witchcrafter players. So I knew that in this slot, I wanted to put an archetype of some sort. Last year's Megatons gave us a lot of really cool stuff, right? Things like the Dangers and the Thunder Dragons. This year's Megatons, however, were a little bit more underwhelming in terms of archetype support, with archetypes like the Marincess, the Infinitrax, the Unchained. So while I wanted to recommend selling off like the Marincess or the Unchained cards here, I actually think that there's still some hope for those archetypes, at least in that they may get some continued support within the next couple of sets that could make them potentially viable. However, there are a couple of Witchcrafter cards in Shmiata, Pottery, Creation, and Madame Vere that I'm still seeing at $1 or so on TCG Player, when I feel like realistically these cards should effectively be considered as bulk. The Witchcrafters as an archetype never really took off, and the whole gimmick of the deck adding back cards from your graveyard to your hand during the end phase just feels way too slow for modern Yu-Gi-Oh! And it would take a lot of really crazy support for this archetype to be even slightly relevant. In noting that though, I think that we should take advantage of the fact that technically on TCG Player now, the cards are sitting at around $1 or so each. So if you're able to move a set for like $2 to $3, or even an entire deck core for $15 to $20, I think that's effectively turning nothing into something. And I think it's a great way to move cards that you would otherwise be sitting on for a very long time. Just be sure to do this early on, soon after the Megatons are released, before quantities flood onto the market and people are better off just digging up Witchcrafter cards out of bulk. Alright, so we're on to the buys now, where we're looking at relatively cheap cards that I think have the most potential to increase in price. Obviously, I'm not saying that they absolutely will, so please don't just listen to me blindly. Look at the cards yourself and buy whatever you feel comfortable holding onto. Keep in mind that it's totally possible that the cards could tank in price rather than appreciate the way that I think they will. Now, disclaimers out of the way, I think that the prismatic secret rare version of Crackdown at $1.50 is an absolute steal. Crackdown is a really amazing card that effectively provides 2 functions: negating your opponent's monster's effect and taking their monster away from them, which is a body off of their field that you can then use for a Link, Synchro, or Xyz play during your turn. I think that this card is a lot like Ice Dragon's Prison, which is starting to see a lot of play right now. And it'll also see play depending on the format, either in the side deck for when you're going first, or in the main deck of control decks like Altergeist and Subterror. Over the last year or so, we've seen a greater emphasis on those combo heavy turn 1 decks, but I think that we're gradually reaching the point where slower, more control oriented decks can actually thrive, and Crackdown could definitely see a ton of meta play in a format like that. Furthermore, Crackdown was already expensive when it was only available as a super rare, hitting as high as $5 a piece, and I think we could definitely see Crackdown as a secret rare do something similar to Called by the Grave and easily hit anywhere between the $5 to $10 range. As a prismatic secret rare, even if Crackdown gets reprinted in common version, that should have minimal effect on this version's price as the highest rarity. So for me, investing in secret rare Crackdowns at less than $2 each is an absolute no-brainer. Next up, we have No Material. So No Material has been one of those cards that seems really good in theory, but in practice it's never really taken off. It saw a little bit of play in people's side decks at one point, but the restriction of not being able to control any cards was just too much, effectively meaning that it was only good on turn 0. Recently, the card did see a little bit of hype as a counter to the Numeron engine, and it could be good against something like the Invoked, but really it just feels like way too situational of a card for the specific format we're in now. However, I think that the card does still have a lot of potential, very similarly to how Dimension Shifter has seen play in different decks before, despite you not being allowed to have any cards in the graveyard. Against the right strategy, or in the right format, the ability to resolve No Material could be really devastating, and it could be worth taking up a side deck slot. I'm not saying that this is going to be super relevant anytime soon or anything like that, but I do think it has at least a little bit of potential. Now, when this card was hyped up on the debut of the Numeron engine, the secret rare versions did hit $15 to $20 each, which was definitely way too much for this card. Even now, ultra rare No Materials are about $3 each, which honestly isn't horrible, but still more than I'd want to pay if I'm looking to invest in a card like this with a lot of upside potential, but a low chance of ever seeing that upside. Once this card hits like $1, maybe $2 in trade if you're feeling really generous, I think that it's worth looking into picking up a few copies just to sit on, because it would theoretically require a minimal investment on your end. Of course, a lot of it will depend on if we see a format evolve where this card is going to be useful, so don't go out of your way to invest in this card. Pick it up here and there if you can get them as throw-ins in trades or something like that, and then just sit on them to see if they do anything. Next up, Get Out is a really cool card that I think just hasn't had its chance to shine in the meta. The card is effectively 2 copies of Compulsory Evacuation Device rolled into 1, but it can only bounce extra deck monsters. This might seem restrictive, but really in order to maximize the value that you're getting out of the card, you'd want to be targeting extra deck monsters anyways. At the moment, the card isn't maybe too amazing. It's negated by either Herald of the Arclight or Borreload Savage Dragon, so you'd have to use it at a weird point in the middle of a combo. It might be good against something like Infernobles that has to go into various extra deck extenders, but I think that everyone is playing Token Collector for the current format, so maybe now just isn't the time for the card. That being said, I think Get Out is a really solid penny stock option to hold onto at only $1 or $2 per copy. The card is going pretty under the radar right now, especially with the Dogmatica engine running around everywhere, as this card is effectively useless against the Dogmatica. However, the ability to basically compulse 2 of your opponent's monsters back to the extra deck in 1 card seems really valuable. Get Out is also the type of card that can very easily go under the radar with a lot of people, but then shoot back up in price really quickly once people catch wind of it and it starts to see play in a given format. At less than $2 each, I would be actively trying to pick up copies for around $1 and then hold on to them so that you can sell them after we see a sort of rotation within the meta. So Ipmasquarena might seem like kind of a strange recommendation here. At $17 a piece at the moment for the secret rare reprints, it is the most expensive card that I'm going to recommend you guys picking up early on. Now, I wouldn't necessarily say that right at the $17 mark you should be buying it. I think closer to the $12 to $15 mark is a good range to pay for the card. However, I think that out of all the generic cards that are being reprinted in the 2020 Megatons, Ipmasquarena is definitely the one that is going to shoot up in price the most over the long run. It's the best out of all the extra deck monsters for us to look at. Appaloosa is being reprinted in maximum gold, Borreload Savage Dragon is a synchro that needs a tuner to make, so it's not as generic, and Avramax really only saw really niche usage over the last year. IP, however, is extremely generic, requiring any 2 non-link monsters in order to make it, and it is only a link 2, so it's going to be a natural combo piece that a lot of decks are going to be able to have access to. This card, in conjunction with Nightmare Unicorn, provides you with disruption and a card that can't be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. Also, it's going to be a prismatic secret rare version of a waifu card, so the card is definitely aesthetically pleasing enough that it will be in very high demand. It is the second highest rarity version of the card aside from the Starlight Rare, which is so scarce that it doesn't really factor into the card's price at all. But yeah, I'm not expecting Ipmasquarena to go anywhere. It might lose out to Needle Fiber in terms of being the #1 rank 2 monster to go into, but I still think it's going to continue to see play moving forward. I am fully expecting the secret rare version of IP to bounce back up towards the $20 to $25 range within the next couple of months. And the last card here, something that I would really call a penny stock, is Trickstar Korrabane. So Korrabane is a card that was originally an ultra rare, and despite typically only being played at 1 as part of the Trickstar engine, it was anywhere from $10 to $20 a piece for most of its life. Now, however, with the Prismatic Secret Rare reprint in the Megaton, you can grab Korrabane for less than $1 each. The Trickstar engine isn't as strong as it used to be back when Nightmare Mermaid was still legal, where you would just want any 2 monsters on the field however you can, because Light Stage is currently limited. However, I think that we could definitely see Light Stage go to 3 on a future ban list, and that would instantly make the Trickstar engine as a whole much more viable, which would in turn drive up the price of Korrabane, and I think that you would want to have the secret rares as the highest rarity readily available. Keep in mind that theoretically, Korrabane is also a pretty strong generic opening play, allowing you to special summon it for free if you control no monsters or if you only control Trickstar monsters, so that's kind of cool. Maybe it could see play in something similarly to how Petincessor or Adhara are currently played in Adamantipator's now, but where you need a light target, for example. But yeah, when I was looking over the Megaton cards, I was pretty surprised to see Korrabane so low on the list in terms of price. It definitely feels undervalued for what it is. It's a card that I would feel perfectly comfortable picking up and holding onto a few copies of for when it eventually becomes useful again and then spikes up in price. Alright guys, that is it for today's episode. Hopefully you guys are all just as excited about the Megatons as I am. Unfortunately, it's looking like I won't be able to open my cases of tins until next week, but that's okay. I'm still looking forward to seeing what we pull. I need to pull a few copies of Dragoon for Tombox and myself and some of the rest of my group of friends, but hopefully they should be pulling enough that I should have some extra. Hopefully I will be able to hit up some people this weekend as well, see what everyone else pulls, and trade for some of the cards that I mentioned in this episode. Anyways guys, if you enjoyed today's video, please be sure to hit that thumbs up button for me. Also make sure you leave a comment in the comment section down below. Let me know what cards you guys are either looking to pick up or get rid of that maybe I didn't cover in today's video, so I can check out your opinions as well. Also, if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button to get all of the latest and greatest content from both Tombox and myself here on the channel. And yeah, until next time guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.